corporations. In 2009, while Bill Clinton was setting up one of the family's shell companies in New York, in that same year, Hillary Clinton was at the State Department working with U.S. corporations to pressure Haiti not to raise the minimum wage to 61 cents an hour from 24 cents. Seriously, while Bill was dumping bags of money into what I assume was one of those game show win machines where you grab the dollar bills, while he was doing that, Hillary was trying to keep 37 cents per hour out of the hands of destitute Haitians. There she is, right there, running down the streets of Haiti with a briefcase of money. You know what? I say good for Hillary. Why should those garment workers make 61 cents an hour? It only takes them 3 hours at work to earn enough for a bus ride home. They're doing fine. It's never enough with them, is it? What's next? 62 cents an hour, huh? 63 cents? Where's it gonna end? 64 cents? What are you, Dr. Dre? But seriously, multi-billion-dollar corporations like Hanes couldn't bear spending the extra money to have their stupid underwear made. The minimum wage hike that Hillary helped block would have cost Hanes $1.6 million a year, while they make $211 million.
Haitian activists staged a protest outside Hillary Clinton's Manhattan office. The demonstrators claim billions of dollars were stolen through the Haiti Reconstruction Commission headed by Bill Clinton. They also say Haiti was used as a cover for foreign governments to funnel kickbacks of possibly hundreds of millions of dollars through the Clinton Foundation. They say it was done in exchange for favors that Hillary was doing for them as Secretary of State. They say they want their message to get out so Americans won't vote for her if she runs for president.
We are telling the world of the crimes that Bill and Hillary Clinton are responsible for in Haiti.
With one simple phrase, National Council of La Raza President Janet Murgua signaled the height of Hispanic American anger at U.S. President Barack Obama, saying, quote, "For us, this president has been the deporter in chief." Around the country, immigrant advocates have rallied and marched to stop Obama's policies, which have led to nearly 2 million deportations of undocumented immigrants.
The deportations are getting more aggressive.
On a Telemundo televised town hall, U.S. President Barack Obama shot back.
What I've said in the past remains true, which is until Congress passes a new law, then I am constrained in terms of what I'm able to do.
With that one finger that the president is pointing at Republicans, there's 4 that are pointing at him. With that one finger that the president is pointing at Republicans, there's 4 that are pointing at him.
Tonight on Frontline, as a candidate, he promised to fix the immigration system.
The system just isn't working, and we need to change it.
As president, Obama cracked down hard.
What did he give us? 1 million people been deported.
Frontline, the investigative reporting workshop, and correspondent Maria Hinojosa investigate Obama's tough immigration enforcement.
Hasn't the president ended up enacting the Republican agenda?
What the president is doing is enforcing the law of the land.
Examining his promise to deport hardened criminals.
1,000 murderers, 6,000 sex offenders, 45,000 serious drug violators.
While critics say the program has swept up thousands of immigrants with no criminal record.
A mother who had a broken taillight being separated, maybe forever, from her children?
They don't understand how their mother could have been thrown out of the country.
And investigating conditions in the vast network of immigrant detention centers.
Women harassed for sexual favors. Guards taking detainees and beating them, running them down like they were animals.
And listen to what he's saying. 50% less in Canada for drugs.
Lantus, a type of insulin, more expensive in the U.S. Sovaldi for hepatitis C, yep, costs more in the U.S. Humira for arthritis, Crestor for cholesterol, more expensive in the U.S.
Join the Democrats. So that was the Bernie Sanders bill to allow for the importation of prescription drugs into the United States from Canada. Why do you pass a law to make it illegal? 12 Republicans? Yep. 12 Republicans join them. You know who's on board for this? Ted Cruz.
Oh, my God.
So it's good enough for Bernie Sanders, and it's good enough for Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz. Rand Paul also voted for this. John McCain also voted for this. So I'm like, oh, this is going to pass. This is going to be great. Look at Bernie's a real leader. He's not a fairy duster. He's such a good legislator. He knows how to get Ted Cruz to go along with him. Guess who didn't go along with him? The corporate pig Democrats. Guys like, well, Cory Booker. He voted against it. And let me tell you something. When Cory Booker, that corporate pig... Okay, here's Cory Booker with Jake Tapper.
Let me ask you about drugs, because that's obviously an important part of healthcare. And you know Bernie Sanders was very critical of you and 12 other Democrats for voting against a bill that would have allowed the importation of drugs from Canada. I know that you've answered as to why you voted that way. But he was very harsh. He said you and the other Democrats lacked the guts to stand up to the pharmaceutical industry.
Remember this, Cory Booker? Big Pharma paid me $267,000. So
access to initial public stock offerings, the opportunity to buy a new stock at insider prices just as it goes on the market. They can be incredibly lucrative and hard to get.
If you were a senator, Steve, and I gave you $10,000 cash, one or both of us is probably going to go to jail. But if I'm a corporate executive and you're a senator and I give you IPO shares in stock, and over the course of one day that stock nets you $100,000, that's completely legal.
And former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and her husband have participated in at least 8 IPOs. One of those came in 2008 from Visa, just as a troublesome piece of legislation that would have hurt credit card companies began making its way through the House. Undisturbed by a potential conflict of interest, the Pelosi's purchased 5,000 shares of Visa at the initial price of $44. 2 days later, it was trading at $64. The credit card legislation never made it to the floor of the House. Congresswoman Pelosi also declined our request for an interview, but agreed to call on us if we attended her news conference.
Madam Leader, I wanted to ask you why you and your husband back in March of 2008 accepted and participated in a very large IPO deal from Visa. At a time there was major legislation affecting the credit card companies making its way through the House.
Why? Because our government is completely corrupt, and everyone knows it.
And we all know the reason why. And unlimited sums of money have bought the United States Congress.
And did you consider that to be a conflict of interest?
I don't know what your point is of your question. Is there some point that you want to make with that?
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, do you think it's all right for a speaker to accept a very preferential and favorable stock deal?
Well, we didn't.
And you participated in the IPO.
Well, I had many
and at the time you were Speaker of the House.
Is 38 years old, and that's a reference to your son being hired right out of law school by a big company here in Delaware that is in the credit card business, MBNA. He got about $100,000 a year, as I recall. At the same time, you were fighting for a bankruptcy bill that MBNA really wanted to get passed through the Senate, making it much tougher for everyone to file bankruptcy. Wasn't it inappropriate for someone like you, in the middle of all this, to have your son collecting money from this big credit card company while you were on the floor protecting its interest?
Absolutely not. My son graduated from Yale Law School. The starting salary in Wall Street is $140,000 a year if he went to lawyer. Options he had. He came home to work for a bank.
And the hits just keep on coming.
On December 30th, I came across an interesting tweet. Hunter Biden owes the IRS more than $100,000 from his time on the board of Burisma. So I found the original story on dailycaller.com. It was posted on December 29th for his unpaid tax in 2015 for an amount of $112,805. The federal agency issued the previously unreported tax lien in November of 2018. So the Daily Caller is making the assertion they're the first news outlet to report this story.
And the hits just keep on coming.
Said Hunter Biden, while serving on the board of Burisma, had never once traveled to the Ukraine.
Who's raking in $80K a month for a no-show job with absolutely zero qualifications in a foreign country he's never even been to.
I did some research, and Reuters has a story from October 18th of 2019, and sure enough, in the article it says, Burisma during his 5-year period of term on the board, Biden never visited Ukraine for company business during that time.
Put my tinfoil hat on when I talk about these interventionist foreign policy wars and regime change wars. The tinfoil hat thinks military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
People being asked or forced into making decisions that benefit these giant corporations that make weapons and profit off of war.
Yeah.
This is the worst case scenario in terms of conspiracy theories. The idea that someone wants war so that they can make money and they don't care if people die.
Well, you can take your tinfoil hat off because the military-industrial complex is a real thing.
Feeding the troops. The Pentagon has found some serious problems with Halliburton's work on that contract as well.
Pentagon auditors found that a Halliburton contract to provide food and housing for American troops had a staggering $1.8 billion in unsupported costs.
It was all a scam. Halliburton was charging $45 for a 6-pack can of Coke or Pepsi that they give us and the military free in the mess hall.
Now, these sodas were made right there in the desert. It's not as if they were brought over from the United States. These sodas were made with Arabic wraps, you know, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, whatever, right there in the desert. So it's not as if they had an exorbitant transportation rate.
They had the little mobile units that we had to put our clothes in, like a net duffel bag. Halliburton charged the government $100 for every bag of clothes they washed.
And you do get to change the way we spend money and stop spending money on these regime change wars. What would be the first thing you invested in this country?
That's what I often remind people is that right now, today, we spend $4 billion every month in Afghanistan. $4 billion.
Every month.
Every single month. Imagine what could be done with those dollars and those resources in communities like Baltimore.
And so I'd like to ask you, would you be willing to stand with my generation and end the student debt crisis by supporting free college for all?
He did ask you yes or no. Would you support free college for all?
I am not for free 4-year college for all. Thank you.
So let me ask you this, because...
and I wish if I was a magic genie and could give that to everyone and we could afford it, I would.
Bernie Sanders was... when he wanted to have Medicare for all and free college, and Hillary Clinton referred to those things as ponies. Everybody wants a pony. But, you know, remember how they said, you know, Bernie's a fairy duster, pie in the sky. How are you going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for free college? Free college for the whole country? We can't afford that. We can't afford. How are you going to pay for that? So they can't afford free college, but guess what they just did? The Senate's military spending increase alone is enough to make up a public college free. Trump wanted to spend an extra $55 billion. But guess what? Congress went ahead and they said, that's not enough, Trumpy. So they decided to spend $700 billion more dollars like that. $700 billion more dollars. Now, how much would it cost for free college? It would cost roughly, some people say $45 billion, some people say $65 billion. So let's say 65, take the high number. $65 billion. They could have had that like that. We could all have free college right now because... So those concerns about paying for all that stuff, those concerns were brushed aside Monday night as the Senate overwhelmingly approved an $80 billion annual increase, which turns out to be a $700 billion increase.
This defense bill went through the Senate several times starting in September of 2017. Every time Senator Amy Klobuchar voted to increase defense spending.
What is he proposing? I mean, he always says it's free college, and everybody loves hearing this. What is it exactly?
That's $75 billion per year over 10 years.
Free college for everyone going to a public school in the United States would cost $75 billion a year.
Nancy Pelosi's outsmarting Trump at every move, except Trump's getting everything he ever wanted. Despite the widespread Democratic opposition to the $735 billion NDAA produced by House and Senate conferences, Congress is expected to send the fiscal 2020 legislation to the White House as soon as this week. At the same time that this is Pocan. At the same time that this administration has cut food stamps, Medicaid, and reproductive health services from everyday Americans, this president wants to add more than $100 billion to continue endless and unauthorized wars.
Can we afford free college? Yes, we can. Free college for every student going to a public university in the United States is $75 billion a year. In December of 2019, Nancy Pelosi gave President Donald Trump $735 billion for his defense budget next year. 2 years ago, in 2017-2018, this graph shows we were spending $649 billion on defense. We've increased defense spending $86 billion in 2 years, yet no one talks about how we could have used that money to pay for free college for everybody going to a public school in the country.
Hey, how about the idea the Democrats propose we cut the budget? Have you heard that happening? We take $100 billion out of the military and we give it to homeless people and students? No.
Propaganda. I'm not against propaganda. Every country does it, and they have to do it to their own population.
And he says at a Council on Foreign Relations forum about fake news, former editor at Time magazine, his name is Richard Stengel, he directly states that he supports the use of propaganda on American citizens, then shuts the session down when challenged about how propaganda is used against the third world. Former editor of Time magazine. Listen to what he has to say.
So you'll be the last question, but I just want to weigh in on that for 1 second. So there's another word for master narratives. It's called history. Basically, every country creates their own narrative story. And you know, my old job at the State Department was what people used to joke as the chief propagandist job.
First of all, how awesome is it that the guy used to be at the State Department, then he was the editor at Time magazine? What the F? So, and did you hear what they used to call him?
You know, my old job at the State Department was what people used to joke as the chief propagandist job. We haven't talked about propaganda.
Well, let's review what kind of propaganda Time magazine had on its cover while this guy was the editor. Time, the me generation. Well, that's a nice master narrative. The Clinton way. They write their own rules, but will it work this time? And then also in 2015, to get us ready for the Jeb Bush presidency, Time magazine has on its cover the Bush identity. George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, and Jeb. Jeb's the man. He's going to be president. Yeah, this is propaganda.
Propaganda. I'm not against propaganda. Every country does it, and they have to do it to their own population. And I don't necessarily think it's that awful.
There are 6 companies that own all our media. 6 companies that own all our media. The guy who owns the Washington Post is in bed with the CIA and the Pentagon. Okay, so watch, it gets worse.